My grandmother told me that pinching gave cancer. I got pinched once at recess and yelled at the person because I thought they were going to give me cancer. What were the dumbest lies you believed when you were a kid? When I was a child, I got upset after a button came off of my shirt. My mother told me not to worry, and that if I placed the button under a rock in the yard, the button fairy would replace it with a quarter. I believed it, and to my mother's dismay, she discovered I had pulled the buttons off of every shirt in my closet. To this day, 40 years later, shirt buttons can still be found under random rocks in my parents' backyard. I was 7 years old. One of my teachers wanted us to write a letter to a family member or friend or someone. I wrote the letter, got the envelope, got the stamp. My mom had worked at the county jail at the time and she suggested I write one of the inmates who never got mail. So I did. I wrote something along the lines of "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." I'd even signed it with my 7-year-old signature. While I was writing the letter, my mom had left to get to the store. I asked my older brother what our address was because I needed to put a return address. He said 1600 Pennsylvania, Ave Washington, D.C. 20500. For those that don't know, that's the address to the White House. I wrote it on the letter and put it with the mail my mom was sending out. Mind you, I grew up in Michigan and never left the state, but I wasn't smart. Years later, I went to pick my mom up from work and one of the CO called me Mr. President, and I asked why he said that. He mentioned the letter I wrote years prior and how it was a joke in the jail any time my mom mentioned me. This is one of the funniest stories I've ever read in my life. I'm just imagining some random inmate opening a letter and shaky 7-year-old kid writing, "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." He looks at the envelope and it's from the White House. He spends several days wondering who the hell wrote that. You made me cry with laughter. My parents convinced us that the person knocking on our door on weekend nights when we were asleep was our Uncle Shiloh stopping to say hello. We don't have an Uncle Shiloh. It was the pizza guy. When my sister and I were kids, our mom lied and told us that she was a Grammy-nominated and winning singer. She said that all of the trophies were in our attic, knowing that neither of us would ever go in and check for them. My sister and I bragged to all of our friends about it for years, only to discover that our mom isn't a very good singer at all. We've held this lie over her head for nearly 20 years now. So this past Christmas, we gifted her with a fake Grammy that has her name engraved in her favorite music category, citing her as the winner of it. She laughed until she cried. My mom rented A Never-Ending Story, and Dad told me if I tried to watch it I'd have to sit there forever, because it never ended. I remember being thankful for my dad's warning and wondering why Mom would do that to me. When I was a kid, my dad always told me not to touch it because it was an emergency button. One time when I was like 5, we were flying to visit family, and he fell asleep, so I pressed it a bunch because I was curious. Nothing happened, and I fell asleep thinking it must be broken. I woke up in a stroller with my parents upset because the plane had to make an emergency landing, and I started crying because I thought it was my fault. This reminds me of when my mean ex-stepfather, who was big, terrifying, and cruel, told me to never turn the water on outside, the one that you connect a hose to. My friend across the street, we were like 5, needed water to make mud pies, and I accidentally dripped some water onto the cement. I knew he would see it if he got home from work before it dried up. I started crying so hard, and right then it started to rain. I started praying and thanking GD for helping me out of that one and promised to never turn on the water again. When I was 6, my parents told me that when you flush from an airplane toilet, the waste gets dumped mid-air into the ocean. I believed that and told all my friends. Parents then told me they were joking, and I became the class fool. My older brother pranked me once. I had watched a kids' TV show, I think it was The Electric Company, that featured a guest star who was a tap dancer. My brother convinced me that tap dancers made their tapping sounds, not with their feet, but with their mouths. I spent the next several weeks trying to tap dance with my mouth noises before my mom made me quit. I was in on this lie between my mom and younger sister. My sister was about 5 years old at the time, and my mom convinced her that Benadryl was truth serum. My mom would threaten to give it to my sister if she knew she was lying. It was so hilarious, but my sister seriously believed it and would get upset. My mom used to sing some kind of rhyme, like "This little finger makes you laugh," while wiggling her index finger in front of me. The idea was that if I laughed it was because I was lying, and she would treat it as a 100% scientific proof, even though it made me laugh hysterically every single time. Also, it was an angry laugh, because I hated so much that it made me laugh even though I was telling the truth about 90% of the time. You know how Barbie feet are on tippy toes, so they are shaped to fit into a high heel shoe. Well, when I was a kid, I thought that when girls grew up into women that their feet would be shaped like that, despite the fact that I lived in a house with 4 grown women, none of whom had Barbie feet. My dad told me that the reason why police officers spend so much time at donut shops is because the shop owners actually need them there to shoot the holes in the pastries to provide them with the classic donut shape. I found out this was a lie when my dad caught me trying to get behind the counter at Dunkin' Donuts one time because I wanted to see the shooting. Walt Disney invented color. Watching a black and white show, I thought everyone from the 50s and lower had lived in black and white. I asked my father, who invented color. Dad looked at me dead serious and said, Walt Disney. I believed it far too long. I used to work as a reenactor at an 1800s village museum. I would go greet the kids at the school bus in my full outfit and give them some context, including holding up black and white photos of the times before we went into the buildings. One time in a particularly young group, a little girl raised her hand and asked when we go inside, will it be in color or is it still black and white in there? I love this little insight into how a child's mind works. One time I was at my dad's, parents separated, and him and a friend were hanging outside sipping beers and smoking cigarettes while I was decapitating dandelions with my sweet-ass plastic ninja sword. My dad never let me have soda when I was a kid. His friend left and my dad went inside to do dishes. I saw a 7-Up can on the deck table and sprinted towards and took a huge swig. Turns out they had been asking and putting their cig butts in there. I run inside and throw up and my dad goes, what happened? I lied and said nothing, but he figured it out. So he told me all the soda he buys tastes like that even if they are unopened. I believed him for a few years till I was like 9. My dad told me he was color blind to the extreme when I was 8. The sky is green, the grass is blue. Go was red, stop was green. The ultimate, white people look black and black people look white. My mom made him fix that last statement quick when I asked her, Mommy, do I look black to you too? She was livid, but I was so gullible at that age law. When I was a little fellow, my parents used to told me when you smoke you'll die instantaneously. Unfortunately, they forgot this at a campfire organized by our former neighborhood and smoked a cig. I remember I was desperately trying to stop them and cried all the time because I thought they're both about to die. The teachers in my school told us, if you pull the fire alarm, ink shoots out in your hands that doesn't wash off for a few days, so they know who pulled it. I was 26 when I found out it's all a lie. Edit. As so many people have pointed out, apparently some fire alarms do have ink in them. Ours did not though, so still a lie, I guess. Lost my stuffed animal, a white dog, in the airport in Miami when I was 5. It was my favorite, and I was really sad about it. A few weeks later, my mom presented me with a brown dog that otherwise looked exactly like the white one I'd lost. She said the workers at the airport had found it and mailed it to us, but he got a tan because he was in Florida. Bought it hook, line, and sinker for a few years. Tan dog is now my son's, and he's a big fan. Our neighbor's son has autism, and he had a stuffed alligator that was pink and yellow. He carried it with him everywhere for years. It would get torn, and they repair it. Eventually, the fabric was so thin it just fell apart. They hid it from him and told him that gator had grown up and gone to live with the other gators. He was so inconsolable, they eventually found a slightly larger alligator that was green and gave it to him. They told him that gator had been living in the sewers with his friends, and it turned him green. He finally outgrew the second gator a couple of years later. I could not understand how all the death scenes in war movies seemed so realistic. So I asked one of my older brothers how they did it. He proceeded to tell me that they empty out state prisons in the area the movie is being made, dress them up, and give them guns and tell them that if they survive the filming, then they get to leave jail after. I was told that at around 7, and I believed it till I was around 10. As a kid, my whole extended family would go camping and my great-grandfather would bring a big salt shaker for every kid. When we arrived, he would pass them out to each of us and tell us, if you get salt on a squirrel's tail, it throws off the squirrel's balance and he can't climb the trees anymore. That's how you can catch one and keep it for a pet. Cue all of us running around chasing squirrels with salt shakers, trying to catch one of the little for hours while the adults got to sit around drinking uninterrupted. Never got my pet squirrel.